Dear colleagues, welcome to Yerevan. It is a great pleasure to see you all here. Let me first warmly thank our Armenian colleagues for their generosity and their hospitality over these next few days. Let me also use this opportunity to welcome those of you participating in the meeting of the Standing Committee for the first time. At least the one from Finland, the head of delegation, is here for the first time. Welcome, Ville. Before we begin, please note that per usual practice, this meeting is being recorded and the footage will be posted on the OSCE's YouTube page. Should any delegation wish to raise an issue under the point 8, any or other business, please inform the International Secretariat at the podium in advance. Finally, please note that our meeting should conclude at 12:30. Then I would like to go to the item number 1, adoption of the agenda. I would like to ask you first to adopt the agenda for this meeting, which has been circulated. Can we adopt the agenda? The agenda is adopted. Then we go to item number 2, which is the report of the President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mrs. Pia Kauma, which is me. So, our first item is the report of the President. Please be reminded that a written report was distributed electronically earlier this week. The report is available on the electronic folders and on the OSCE app. To save time for discussion, I will not go into detail regarding what is included in the written report. Note, however, that the report did not include my recent visit to Azerbaijan, Georgia, and bilateral meetings here in Armenia this week. I will therefore take this opportunity to inform you of our discussions. First of all, let me warmly again thank the Armenian delegation and the National Assembly for hosting our autumn meeting. Not only did the Parliament manage to organize this conference in a very short time frame, but it's also the first time that Armenia hosts an official meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you. And thank you, Sargis, especially. Hosting one of our meetings is a clear demonstration of commitment to the work of the OSCE and to the spirit of Helsinki. So thank you to our colleagues Sargis, Kandanian, and to the leadership of the National Assembly, and of course to the staff for putting this event together. I think they all deserve a round of applause. Together with Secretary General Roberto Montella, we had fruitful meetings yesterday in Yerevan with the Prime Minister and the Speaker, who will join us this afternoon. We also met with the Deputy Foreign Minister. We met with the Red Cross representatives and the Armenian human rights defender to discuss efforts deployed to support refugees recently displaced. Given the recent developments in the region, I regret that some delegations chose not to attend this autumn meeting, despite the guarantees provided at the highest level by the Armenian authorities. I raised the issue with the delegation of Azerbaijan in Baku earlier this week. I hope that this will not turn out to be a missed opportunity for our Assembly. In our meetings in both Baku and here in Yerevan, we discussed the need to move forward with a peace agreement and the normalization of ties. I got the feeling that both countries are ready for peace. Basic principles seem to have been agreed to. There is a willingness to conclude this agreement soon. In this context, we need to encourage parliamentarians to add their voice to the peace efforts. Our Assembly will continue to offer its platform to contribute towards this. We should continue to explore ways that we can contribute to confidence-building efforts. Clearly, major challenges remain. There are large displaced populations whose rights must be respected. We met with their representatives to hear their experiences. We also need to continue to engage at the highest levels to make sure that all commitments made are followed, bearing in mind the role and interests of certain regional players. In between Yerevan and Baku, I was in Georgia. Our visit was a good opportunity to encourage greater collaboration among political forces to reform the country and underline that Georgia is well positioned to foster regional cooperation. We also visited the occupation line and internally displaced persons to bring renewed attention to the fact that large parts of Georgia's territory are still occupied by the Russian Federation. It was important for the OSCE to demonstrate continued solidarity with those living with the consequences of the 2008 conflict. This is a summary of our meetings this week. Let me just note that I was also accompanied by our special representative on the South Caucasus, Kari Henriksen. Thank you, Kari. Additional information is included in the press releases which have been issued during our visits. If I can refer to just one issue included in my written report, let me highlight in particular the current leadership crisis of the OSCE. Our Vancouver Declaration raised alarm bells on the situation. I shared your message when I addressed the OSCE Permanent Council in September. I also raised this directly with the chairperson in office, Gujar Osmani from North Macedonia. It is something that I'm also working on in close collaboration with the Foreign Ministry of Finland as we prepare for the 2025 chairmanship of the OSCE. I know many of you have questions about what is coming next for the OSCE. That is why I sincerely regret that the OSCE chairperson in office will not be able to attend this meeting in Yerevan, as had been envisaged. Rest assured that I did everything in my power to try to ensure his presence here. This is a missed opportunity for us to engage with the chairpersonship, but it is also a missed opportunity to mobilize political support for the OSCE in these challenging times. I will stop here, reminding you again that other issues are covered in my written report. I will now open the floor for your comments. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Please raise your country plate to request the floor.
Maybe we can take
Yes. Mr. Wilson. You have the floor.
Madam President, I'd like to thank you. As a delegate from the United States of America, Joe Wilson, just so honored, and I've mentioned before, so humbled and inspired to be here with people who are making a difference on behalf of security and cooperation for the people of the world. With that in mind, I want to thank you for your strong leadership of the Assembly in your opening months of the presidency. I greatly appreciate your robust engagement on all regional and institutional crises affecting the OSCE and the OSCE region. You are making a voice of the Assembly heard at a decisive time for the future of transatlantic security. I also want to thank you for chairing the Parliamentary Support Team on Ukraine and for naming me as the co-chair, along with Ukrainian colleague Mikita Poterayev. I further welcome your suggestion that the Standing Committee consider establishing a dedicated committee to consider the future of the OSCE-PA. Putin's territorial aggression and systematic efforts to undermine the OSCE and OSCE-PA deserves full attention, strenuous condemnation, and strong resolve to be helpful to OSCE and really ultimately helpful to the people of Russia. I deeply appreciate your unequivocal recognition of Israel's right to exist and its right to self-determination in face of the Hamas inexcusable barbarism campaign just 5 weeks ago today of terror and massacre against the people of Israel. Sadly, I believe we're in a war we did not choose, of dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. With Putin invading Ukraine on February 24, 2022, and then the Hamas, being a puppet of Iran, invading Israel on October 7th. The civilized world must stand together, or murderous aggression will prevail. And we can succeed. We can achieve peace through strength, and the OSCE has never been more important. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Karimi from Netherlands, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like actually to join our colleagues from United States and congratulate you for your very strong leadership in the last few months. I think it is really important that OSCE has a strong voice in a current situation in OSCE, which we are really facing a huge institutional crisis. So actually, my question is whether would we be able, from this autumn meeting, create a resolution and a strong, actually, statement by OSCE and announcing the desire and political will of parliamentarians, the representatives of people, towards actually a ministerial meeting, that they have to act and they have to come together and solve the institutional problems that the OSCE is facing now. Otherwise, I think we all share the idea that we are really in a very, very bad situation, and this, when we see what is going on in our region and the conflicts going on and the wars going on. So my concrete question is, Madam President, what kind of instrument we have from this meeting so that we can really emphasize the importance of decision-making by our ministerial meeting in 1 week, actually, in about 1 week.
Mr. Sam Karatsev from Georgia.
Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Thanks to Armenian delegation for hosting us. I wanted to express my gratitude for the recent visit of the OSCE President and the delegation to Georgia and to the region as a whole. I believe it was a very timely visit to assess the situation and also to look into possibilities of establishing a lasting peace in South Caucasus. It was also very important from the OSCE side to visit the occupation line and to visit the settlement of the internally displaced persons that are not able to go back to their homes due to Russian occupation for already more than 15 years, or some also 30 years. And I wanted also to mention here that Georgia is ready to facilitate peace dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We are committed to provide our good offices. We are committed to provide Tbilisi as a venue for negotiations, and we are hopeful that with the commitment from both sides that have been already expressed publicly and officially, we will be able to celebrate the lasting peace between our two brotherly and neighbor nations in the coming months. So from our side, Georgia is ready to facilitate the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next is Madame de Rieder from Germany.
Guten Morgen, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, für die Worterteilung. Ich möchte Ihnen noch mal ganz herzlich dafür danken, dass Sie mich berufen haben als Vorsitzende des Ad-hoc-Committee on Migration. Migration ist eine der zentralen Herausforderungen in unserer Zeit, und ich möchte dabei nur 3 Hotspots nennen, mit denen wir uns intensiv befassen müssen, auch hier im Standing Committee. Das eine betrifft den russischen Angriffskrieg gegen die Ukraine. Das zweite betrifft den Exodus der armenischen Bevölkerung, Sie haben es bereits angesprochen, aus der Region Nagorny-Karabach. Und zusätzlich haben wir uns auch noch zu befassen mit dem Krieg zwischen Israel und der terroristischen Organisation Hamas, mit denen wir uns ja insbesondere auch am Montag befassen werden. Ein Krieg, den es so hätte nie geben dürfen. Ich bin der festen Überzeugung, dass dies Herausforderungen sind, die wir als Parlamentarierinnen und Parlamentarier angehen und auf dieser Dialogplattform auch managen können. Das Komitee für Migration hat sich jedenfalls vorgenommen, diese Themen ganz weit oben auf die Agenda zu setzen. Und dank Ihrer Unterstützung, Frau Präsidentin, ist es gelungen, auch 6 neue Mitglieder für dieses Komitee zu gewinnen. Wir sind inzwischen 20 Mitglieder. Ich werbe aber dafür, sich ruhig auch noch zu beteiligen. 16 Länder der OSCE sind Mitglied in der Kommission. Es dürften durchaus noch mehr werden. Wir haben uns befasst, schon gleich bei der ersten Sitzung, nicht nur mit unserer Agenda und der Situation in Nagorny-Karabach. Und ich bin sehr dankbar, und es ist, glaube ich, ein wichtiges Symbol, dass wir heute hier und in den kommenden Tagen in Yerevan tagen. Das ist, glaube ich, auch ein wichtiges politisches Symbol. Und deshalb will ich auch noch mal Dank sagen für die Gastfreundschaft der armenischen Delegation und dem Delegationsvorsitzenden sage ich sehr herzlich danken. Der Fokus, den wir zukünftig einnehmen müssen, damit wir nicht den Mut verlieren angesichts der großen Herausforderung, ist, dass wir auf Best-Practice-Beispiele rekurrieren. Ein solches Best-Practice-Beispiel für die Integrationspolitik angesichts der immer feindlicher werdenden Debatten in vielen unseren Ländern Migrantinnen und Migranten gegenüber ist etwa Kanada. Und deshalb möchte ich die Gelegenheit nutzen, Dr. Hedy Fry zu danken, die ein erstes Online-Meeting mit uns organisiert hat und uns deutlich gemacht hat, durch ihre organisationelle, aber auch inhaltliche Expertise, wie wichtig es ist, dass wir nach wie vor eine hohe Willkommenskultur pflegen. Wir müssen uns als Abgeordnete ganz schlicht dagegen wehren, dass Menschen ausgegrenzt werden, dass Menschen mit Diminutiven bedacht werden und dass insbesondere wir als Parlamentarier auch die 3 Säulen unserer Organisation wahren müssen, zu denen auch die Menschenrechte gehören. Ich lade deshalb noch mal ganz herzlich dazu ein, bei der Migrationskommission mit dabei zu sein. Unser erstes Präsenztreffen wird morgen stattfinden um 12:15 Uhr. Und auch hier, Frau Präsidentin, danke ich Ihnen, denn Sie haben zugesagt, einen Bericht gemeinsam mit der Sonderbeauftragten Kari Henriksen abzuhalten über ihre Reise in die Länder des Südkaukasus. Ich werbe also dafür, auch den Gaststatus einzunehmen, und ich bin sehr gespannt auf Ihren Vortrag. Aber ich glaube, die Wichtigkeit unserer Arbeit ist kaum zu unterschätzen. Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Mrs. De Ridder. And next one is Sartis Kandanian from Armenia.
Madam President, dear friends, dear colleagues, I want to warmly welcome you all in Armenia. It is a big, great pleasure and honor for us to host first ever OSCE meeting in Armenia. And thank you for warm words that you have expressed. Indeed, this timing of this meeting is very important, and for us, it was very important to go on with the organization of this meeting and make it happen, because your presence here is a support to Armenia, is a support to Armenian democracy, and we very much appreciate it. Madam President, I want to personally thank you for your personal engagement from day one until now in your capacities as the President of the Parliamentary Assembly, and for your last visit, this visit to the region. We yesterday had very fruitful and important conversations, and today I'm not going to speak about the regional realities. Today you will listen them from the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the Parliament, from the Secretary of the Security Council. But it is very important to not lose the focus on our region, and because every moment can become more violent as it's happening for the last 3 years. And you addressed, Madam President, the issue of the delegations, and particularly the delegation of Azerbaijan, who didn't arrive to Armenia for this meeting. And I want to reiterate that Armenia was ready to host all the delegations for the autumn meeting, and those delegations who would ask for security, we would definitely provide, and it was many times reiterated to you and to Secretary General. So I think I want to just to state that Armenian side was ready to host all delegations, and thank you to the delegations who are present here, and I wish you all of us a very successful autumn meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarsis. And next one is Irene Sharalambides from Cyprus.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I would like to thank our Armenian hostess, the head of the Armenian delegation, for their excellent hospitality. Until now, we've seen their amazing country, so thank you for having us here. Also, Madam President, I wish all the best to you. I think it's the first autumn meeting you chair. The reason I take the floor is because I'm coming from a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean. And Mediterranean at the moment is on fire. And many of the main actors involved are from OSCE area countries. On the 7th of October, the massacre of the attack against Israel, the massacre of Israeli people, created a very, very unstable environment at the area. At the moment, in my country, we host troops from USA, from Germany, from Dutch. Cyprus is trying to create humanitarian corridors for the civilians in Gaza Strip. But I think we must reach an agreement to have a resolution by the end of this session, because this is a very, very crucial session. We have the South Caucasus issues between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We have the ongoing war in Ukraine after the invasion of Russia. Things are unstable there as well. And now we have the attack against Israel. So I think we must reach a resolution, and we have an important role to play when it comes to that. Thank you.
Thank you all for your comments and questions. I would like to ask them each and every one independently and individually. First of all, Congressman Wilson, thank you for your kind words on behalf of the US delegation. Me and the whole team, we are very happy that you are here. We have all been following the discussions on your budget and on current topics and issues on the television, and we really do appreciate that you made it here. You have other topics on your agenda, I'm sure, on domestic issues, but it's really good that you are here with us and show your support. The second speaker, Farah Karimi, I think it was a very important point that you made in your speech. I will take the message personally to Skopje, where the foreign ministers will be meeting in 2 weeks' time. And I will be maybe second or third one of the speakers, second one on the list of the speakers. And that is the moment when all the foreign ministers will still be present at the plenary hall. So rest assured that this message will be conveyed and in a strong voice. Third, Nikol Samkaradze from Georgia, thank you for your kind words. It was really pleasant to visit Georgia. You are in a very important moment also for your own country, because we all heard that you were given the candidacy of the European Union, which will be officially given in December, in a couple of weeks' time. But when it comes to our visit, we considered it very important that we also go to see the occupation line on the ground with our own eyes, what it really looks like when another country is illegally occupying territories of another country. And we talked to the people there and saw with our own eyes that it is not a situation that in any means can be accepted, and we give you all your support. And we also give you all our support in facilitating the peace agreement here in the region. You play a very important role in supporting Armenia and also Azerbaijan in these negotiations, and your presence is very much appreciated. Madam de Ridder, I think it's, for me personally, I'm very honored that you took the position of heading the Migration Committee. I really appreciate the work that you've done in this organization, and I also consider it very important that I myself come from the EPP group and you are a social democrat. In times like this, we need inclusive approach from all political parties, from different geographical areas, from both the genders as well. And the migration as a topic is more important than ever. And when I appointed you to this position, I really didn't know where we would end up during this year. It's already only passed 4 or 5 months, and we still already see that there are many things going on, and also here in Armenia. We visited yesterday, together with a delegation, a shelter where we saw the refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh. There were 28 families, about 100 people living under the same roof, and they shared their experience. And many of them actually hope that they can go back. But they are, of course, afraid of what is happening. And what you also said about the best practices, Canada is a good example. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the Honorable Hedy Fry what she has to say about their experiences on managing refugees and asylum seekers. And then Sargis, thank you again for your kind words. When it comes to the security issues, the 3 delegations which didn't arrive, maybe it is just my speculation that there might be some other reasons, not just security issues, why they didn't arrive. But rest assured that we will be in contact with Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Russia after this session, and let them know what has been discussed. Then Irene, my friend Irene. So thank you for your intervention. And I'm really pleased that you are taking the leadership tomorrow when it comes to the corruption issue, which is important also under the conditions of war, because we don't want the money and resources to go into wrong hands. They have to be used the way they are supposed to be used. And also what you mentioned about the humanitarian corridor when it comes to Gaza, this topic will be discussed today. We can discuss it on item number 7, and also on Monday when we have this Mediterranean Forum headed by Pascal Alizat. So we have many occasions to discuss that in more detail. Thank you. So next, we move to the next item, which is item number 3, report of the Treasurer of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Johan Buser. I will now give the floor to Johan for his report.
Thank you, Madam President, and dear colleagues, it's very good to see all of you, even though we are facing difficult times. I would like to thank especially our Armenian hosts for hosting us during this meeting, and I'm looking forward to hear all discussions and to chat also in between the official meetings. Dear colleagues, as a treasurer of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, it is my honor to present a summary of our recent financial activities and the path forward for our organization. The 32nd financial year of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly commenced on October the 1st, 2023, and it will extend until September the 30th in 2024. In these challenging times, with complex global political landscapes marked by protracted conflicts, mass migration issues, the ongoing fight against terrorism, and the pressing challenge of climate change, the security architecture in our OSCE PA region faces unprecedented challenges. Therefore, it's imperative that our financial foundation remains robust and resilient. At our recent meeting in Vancouver, the Standing Committee approved a 2.4% increase in the budget, along with an additional 0.5% extra budgetary funding for the Integrated Financial Business and Performance Audit. And this business performance audit was also unanimously adopted at our summer session. Thank you for that. Despite the challenges we face, it is important to emphasize that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has consistently demonstrated remarkable financial efficiency and cost effectiveness. Our budget remains considerably lower than that of comparable international parliamentary organizations. In accordance with the rules of procedure, I will present the audited accounts and findings from the Integrated Financial Business and Performance Audit to the Standing Committee in Vienna during the winter meeting in February next year. While I cannot disclose Deloitte's conclusions at this time, I can inform you that, owing to the non-payment of the Russian contribution and the unforeseen exorbitant costs associated with the annual session in Vancouver, our financial results for the fiscal year running from October the 1st, 2022 to September the 30th, 2023 are projected to surpass the budgeted figures. I extend my sincere gratitude to the President, the Bureau, and the Standing Committee for their unwavering support. As of November the 1st, 2023, we have received over 63% of our annual contributions for the current financial year. However, it is essential to acknowledge that the financial ramifications resulting from the Russian Federation's failure to meet their financial obligations will adversely impact the current financial year. One significant milestone we are proud to announce is the commencement of an integrated financial business and performance audit conducted by independent external auditors, Deloitte. This initiative aims to fortify our financial strength, enhance transparency, accountability, and integrity within the OSCE PA. Both the President and we have held discussions with the Deloitte audit team. The Secretary General has conveyed that the Deloitte team has been granted unrestricted access to all relevant human resource and financial data, ensuring an impartial assessment of OSCE PA's financial and operational performance. The comprehensive audit covers a wide range of parameters, including cost efficiency, procurement procedures, governance and compliance policies, performance and efficiency analysis, human resource recruitment and dismissal policies, process adequacy and effectiveness, compliance verification, remuneration and benefits benchmarking, budget management assessment, and alignment with Assembly objectives. The rigorous examination underscores our unwavering commitment to continuous improvement and adherence to the highest standards. I would also like to extend my commendation to the Secretariat for the steadfast dedication to achieving efficiency and cost savings. Your efforts are greatly appreciated. I also would like to express my appreciation for the diligent efforts of my predecessor, Treasurer Peter Juhl-Jensen, and President Emeritus Margareta Cederfelt in achieving cost savings during the previous year's budgetary process. We have been able to implement a series of budgetary reductions, including a 7.69% reduction in the Vienna office. I have received valuable feedback also from numerous delegations in the OSCE, and after careful consultation with the Secretary General and the President and myself, we have jointly instructed the Secretary General to explore the feasibility to downsizing the International Secretariat's office presence in Vienna. This process is now ongoing, and I will ensure that the Assembly remains informed of any further developments. Looking ahead to the 32nd financial year, from October the 1st, 2024 to September the 30th, 2025, my objective as Treasurer is to align our budget with the political will of the Assembly. We have received input from numerous delegations concerning proposed budget modifications, which I intend to integrate into the upcoming budget. The forthcoming budget will include enhanced granularity in cost centers, providing more detailed descriptions to help participating states understand how funds are allocated and being spent. Given the upcoming election cycle, we anticipate a super cycle with elections in several countries. To align with our objectives to be leaders on the political map, our current election observation mission funding is insufficient. Therefore, an adjustment in the budget will be necessary to accommodate the increase in election observation participants and frequency of elections observed in the next financial year. In response to recent inflation trends, I recognize the urgency in addressing compensation issues. To this end, I intend to propose a tiered adjustment to the next budget over 4 years, aiming to bring salaries in line with the UN salary scale and post-adjustment rates. The success of this plan will depend on participating states' willingness to allocating the necessary budgetary adjustments. Finally, I would like to emphasize the importance of additional contributions from national delegations to support the Assembly. And these contributions can be in form of seconding personnel, hosting the Assembly's meetings and events, providing extra budgetary contributions for specific events, programmatic activities, election observations, and supporting our headquarters in Copenhagen and our office in Vienna. Your contributions are invaluable in ensuring the financial stability and operational effectiveness of the Secretariat. In conclusion, I wish to extend my sincere appreciation to the Icelandic and Estonian delegations for their leadership in increasing their contribution amounts. And finally, let us not forget Rule 41.5, which states that when a participating state has not made its due contribution for a period of 9 months, members of its delegations shall not be allowed to vote until the contribution has been received. And this underscores the importance of financial responsibility for all participating states. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to working collaboratively to ensure the financial stability and success of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer. And now I open the floor for comments and questions, and I can see that the first one to take the floor is Mark Pritchard from United Kingdom.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to you and the Secretary-General and indeed our Armenian hosts for hosting this session. Can I thank the Treasurer for his report and say that this is a good start, but I think it is only a starting point. I think many of the concerns that many colleagues had in this organisation, I think, are finally being addressed. and that is a good start. But I think there is a little more way to go, but let's see what happens over the next few months. If I may, on your page 3 of your report, 2 points. Under increasing cost efficiency in the Vienna office, I welcome the fact that there's been a decrease of 7.69% out of that office, and I just wondered, where did that come from? How is that manifest? Was it a restructuring of staff? Was there exiting of certain members of staff, etc., or other ways of cutting costs? And then secondly, again on page 3, if I may, just briefly quote the report back to you. You say, given the recent inflation trends, I recognise the urgency in addressing compensation issues. This is in relation to staff. Therefore, I intend to propose a tiered adjustment to the next budget over 4 years aimed at bringing salaries, staff salaries, in line with the United Nations salary scale and post-adjustment rates, basically accommodation allowances and other expenses. However, the success of this plan will depend on participating states' willingness to allocate the necessary budgetary adjustments. 2 points within that one. First of all, clearly there is some struggle to get existing budgets out of member states, and I salute the Treasurer's optimism in trying to get more money. But that might be a challenge. But more importantly, more substantively, if I may, and I think I've raised this before, if this organisation is going to move towards UN-type style compensation and pay rates, which will invariably see an increase in the budget, then I think the organisation needs to move towards United Nations transparency along those pay scales and terms and conditions and expenses. If you go into the United Nations website today, whether it's the Secretary General through to somebody who's an interpreter, you will see the pay bands, which you can check what they are, the parameters, you can check the terms and conditions, accommodation, education allowance, or whatever it is. So I'm not against it, and it's not for me to micromanage, but on behalf of the United Kingdom, you say about the willingness of member states. We are willing to look at the principle of that. People should be paid for the work that they do, but there needs to be transparency. And at the moment, we don't actually have a lot of transparency or a breakdown of those salaries, adjustments and education costs. So, for example, and finally, if I may, thank you, Madam President, for your tolerance. If you look at the current budget, on permanent staff, I think there are 24 permanent staff, I may be corrected in a moment. So the average per member of staff is €123,000. Or put it another way, the staff and staff expenses equate to over 70% of the entire budget of this organisation. You said earlier that this organisation is slightly less expensive than other comparable organisations. I think it would be useful to have that comparator in a column sometime in order that people can reflect on that particular point. So it's this. I'm happy to look at that in principle, but we are not happy to support it unless we have the commensurate transparency and breakdown as the current United Nations system has. It's not my personal view, it's the view of the delegation, and it's a view that would be shared by my constituents and the British taxpayer who doesn't mind paying for all international organisations but wants to see transparency. Thank you. So on the point of the Vienna office, you would, right, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Pritchard, for your contributions, and I also would like to thank you for your engagement in the work of being a more transparent and cost-efficient organization within the OSCE. And I agree very much with what you said, that this is only a start, because we are facing inflation, we are facing countries that don't pay their fees and so on, so we need to change some things in the budget. And I'm looking forward both hearing the British delegation, of course, what you have to to suggest and listen to you. And let's sit down a little bit more after this meeting and discuss further what we can do and have a look at it together. And I also would like to say that I'm open in order being transparent, meeting other delegations, hearing what they have to say, and to bring these contributions in our common work in order to get a more transparent and cost-efficient organization. And I appreciate a lot your remarks, and we will have a look through all costs, of course, and also listen to what all of the member states has to say. So thank you for your remarks, Mr. Pritchard.
Sorry, on the Austria point, why did you see it? Yeah.
Regarding the Vienna office with the 7.69%, it's mainly due to adjusting the size of the office building, so that is the start. So we have a smaller sized the building at the moment in Vienna. That is what it stands for.
Thank you, Treasurer. And the next one is Pascal Alizard from France, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais tout d'abord saluer les travaux qui sont faits à la fois par notre trésorier et par toute l'équipe. Je crois que ça répond à un certain nombre de questions et que cela va vraiment dans le bon sens. Je comprends aussi la problématique des salaires et de l'alignement sur les conventions de l'ONU. C'est quelque chose que l'on peut tout à fait entendre. Je voudrais, cela étant, attirer votre attention sur la position de la délégation française. Je ne m'exprime pas en mon nom personnel, mais vraiment au nom de la délégation, c'est-à-dire au titre de nos deux chambres, Assemblée nationale et Sénat, dans un souci d'honnêteté et de transparence aussi vis-à-vis de vous, nous ne pourrons pas accepter une augmentation de notre contribution. Nos chambres ne nous le donneront pas. Donc je préfère vous le dire d'ores et déjà, parce qu'on aura forcément un problème sur ce point-là, et je crois que ce ne serait pas correct de ma part de ne pas vous le dire maintenant. Voilà, ça ne met absolument pas en cause, bien évidemment, la qualité du travail effectué à l'Assemblée parlementaire, mais nous avons chacun nos contraintes, et aujourd'hui, dans nos pays, il n'y a pas d'augmentation de contribution.
Okay, I got it a little bit later because it was some problems with the translation, but I understood that you were saying, Mr. Alizard, that France cannot accept paying more. But thank you for saying that, and I'm looking forward to discuss this also with you after the meeting, and we can discuss a little bit more between you and me. Thank you.
Thank you, and the next one is Mr. Coles from Latvia.
Great, thank you, Madam President. Just on top of what the head of the British delegation has spoken on, suggestion would be, obviously we are transforming the OSCE as well to the best standards and practice as well. Transparency is absolutely the core value of this institution. We have now conducted, and I understand in winter session we'll hear the results of the audits, both financial, business as well. But when it comes to your proposed model that might be adopted at the OSCE, the payroll for the staff members to take the practice of the UN, I would suggest that not rush with that decision. I would suggest that it will be good to compare other institutions, international organizations, the Council of Europe, for example. What is their practice? What is actually the pay transparency directive in the EU? And to not just copy-paste, but actually to adapt to our, first of all, financial reality that we are having, and not just copying something that is existent, that is totally the functionings of UN, which is, you know, no comparison to the OSCE, particularly Parliamentary Assembly. So I think we have to take the best practice there is and create our own set of rules, and that really provides the transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coles, for your contribution. I think it's a good point you made regarding the scales, and this is also something for the integrated business financial audit, and it's also something for us to compare to other organizations as well. So we will take this into account as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you for all the questions and comments, and thank you also, Treasurer Johan Buser, for your very good answers to these questions. If there are no more comments or questions to this point, we move to item number 4, which is a report of the Secretary General of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Roberto Montello.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And let me also thank Sarkis and Armenia for organizing this meeting here in a very short time. I hope it doesn't become the practice that we always do it in the short time. Also last year, Poland managed to organize it in a very short time. I'd like to thank you, your team, and of course Gustavo and our conference team for putting this together in a...
Excuse me, we can't hear you. Sorry, we cannot hear the Secretary General.
Sorry. Yeah? Okay. Just so that I see them better. So I hope this doesn't become a practice that we have to organize this meeting in a short time, but I know that Dublin has already committed for next year, and there are countries who are already committed for in the years ahead. Thank you, Gustavo, and the conference team for putting this together in a short time. I think the venue is excellent, the seat is beautiful, so I hope that we'll have 3 days to do very good work here. I'd like to thank you, Madam President, for your leadership, for being very busy in these few months since you became President. You've been busy on all the dossiers. As soon as we started your presidency, you went to Vienna on a climate change dossier, but you've been active on South Caucasus, on Central Asia. You have been very active on Ukraine by leading the committee on Ukraine and convening it a couple of times. And immediately after this meeting, we will have another meeting on the parliamentary support team for Ukraine. So thank you very much for your leadership on that. My report is written, was distributed already. It's only a report from the activities of the Secretariat and the Assembly since July to now. I will not go through the entire report and read it out to you because you have a chance to read it. I'll just bring out some few highlights from the report. We've just completed a regional tour. This is the first time, Madam President, that the President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly does the 3 countries in one go, as you've done. It was probably tiring for you, but it was very instructive for us. I will not like to be too excessively optimistic, but I think what you have heard from the leadership both in Azerbaijan and yesterday here in Armenia sounds like let's say, a change of narratives from what we've heard from many years in the Parliamentary Assembly. It looks like things are improving. It looks like there is a viable way for peace in this region. We certainly hope that there will be enough political leadership and political will to get to this peace. And also I would like to thank also Georgia for hosting us in Tbilisi and also for offering good offices to allow also the delegations to talk to each other. And we will see also what could be the parliamentary component in the future of these rapprochements, if we could talk about it. The Ministerial Council of the OSCE will be in 10 days, hosted by colleagues in Skopje. The OSCE, as it's mentioned by Farah Karimi, is indeed in a very difficult situation. At present, the discussions in Vienna and in the capitals give us a picture where we do not know who will be the chair of the organization next year. And this organization without a chair cannot function because you need a chair to convene meetings, to carry out the agenda of the Assembly. So the chair for next year is not decided yet, and I remind you that in the OSCE governmental side of this, the governmental branch of the organization, they operate by consensus. So you need to have all the countries agreeing on every point. So first you have to have consensus on who will be the chair for next year. We have a chair in 2025, it will be Finland. And I actually welcome already your role, Madam President, in working together with the Finnish delegation, as well as your role in facilitating also through your good offices, good discussions in trying to find consensus on the chair for next year. There's need to be a consensus also on who will lead the heads of institutions of the OSCE, the independent institution of the ODIHR, the freedom of the media, the High Commissioner for National Minorities, and my colleague, the Secretary General of the governmental side. There is a risk that on the 1st of December, on the 7th of December, I think, when the mandate expires, we will have no office holders. The paradox would be that the only people who have a mandate in this organization entirely will be you, Madam President, from a political and me from an administrative point of view. So we certainly hope that the organization will find consensus next week. It requires, of course, talking to all the participating states of the OSCE, and of course there is one particularly participating state who has not been very cooperative, but of course we need to talk to also that, the Russian Federation, in order to make sure that we find consensus on all these points, as well as the budget of the organization. Unlike the governmental side of the organization, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, as you can see, is very healthy. You've had an excellent meeting in Vancouver, and here I'd like to again thank Eddie Fry and the Canadian delegation for hosting us there. We had a great meeting. We've had many resolutions. We've had our reports. We have a Vancouver declaration. So we are very lively and very much alive as a parliamentary assembly. And this is because of our, let's say, inevitable comparative advantage, which is that we vote our political declaration by majority. And I think we have to be always appreciative of the fact that we can function because we can continue our work, we can decide where we have our meetings, we can pass our resolution by simply using the rule of majority and not the consensus. And therefore, I also hope that in this Parliamentary Assembly we do not bring big political issues in the only venue where we vote by consensus, which is the Standing Committee, which is mainly to discuss administrative issues, as you've seen on the budget, on other issues. I think political issues, big political decisions should be discussed and voted on in the committees or in the plenaries, but not in the Standing Committee. Otherwise, we will also have the same kind of difficulties that the governmental side has, because we will be subject to the consensus rule also here in the Parliamentary Assembly. We had on the election observation missions, we've had one recent elections in Poland. I'd like to thank also the Polish delegation for welcoming our delegation. We have a busy agenda of elections, as was mentioned. We will have Serbia in December, I think North Macedonia sometimes in the spring, and then there are elections, of course, in Russia and Belarus, and of course, I don't think we will observe the elections in Russia. The Bureau will consider if there is ground to do a possible observation mission in Belarus, but this is again for you, Madam President, and the Bureau to have that discussion. And of course, we have a busy agenda next year with elections in Georgia, in the United States after the summer break. The audit, I think this was an important thing that happened from July to now. I welcome the Treasurer and the President's leadership in this. You had a very good meeting in Copenhagen. We had a very good meeting with the auditor. I would like to thank the Lithuanian delegation and those who were behind this initiative to increase transparency. I think this is very good for the Assembly. It just strengthens us. I look forward. The auditors have already started to work from the 1st of October. They should conclude their work sometimes early January, and a preliminary report will be given to the Treasurer and to the President and then presented in Vienna. We look forward for the recommendations that will come out of the audit, also to help us kind of strengthen administrative or internal functioning. And I think this is very good that it's also watched with close eyes through the political leadership, and Treasurer Buzzer and you, Madam President, have constant contact with the auditor, and I think we look forward for a good outcome of this. On this ground also, Mr. Pritchard, you mentioned the issue of increased transparency. Also, you refer to the United Nations and the post table that is presented. I think indeed this is very important. I actually, at the Vancouver report, if you look at but we can maybe do this regularly, there is indeed a staff table in the line with what the OSCE and the UN does, and you can see the scales of how many human resources are in which category. But I think that what you say is correct. I mean, aiming at UN salary scales, or I think we have to do, as Mr. Cole says, in the years, and not immediately, because it will be a dramatically increase of resources, and we've heard from the French delegation there are not these resources, or there is not appetite for this. So we have to be creative also within the current budget. But I think we have to aim at having at least some benchmark, be it the Council of Europe, be it the OSCE, be it the UN, and then say, okay, but given the limited resources that we have, this is in principle what it should be, but it is that minus 40%, minus 60%. But at least we have a clear benchmark so that there is no arbitrarity. That's, I think we have to introduce the concept of the transparent concept that these salaries have to be regulated by some criteria. So I don't know if a director of an office or the director of the election department is a P5 position, but we do not have resources to pay that person a P5 salary. We say you are in allegedly P5 position, but given the short resources we have, you will get that position minus 30, 40%, depending on the resources that we have available years to years. So it's a kind of starting a discussion together with the auditor on a principle that we need to introduce, indeed to increase transparency on this.
Sorry, Secretary General, forgive me. Can I just say, through you, Madam President, can I ask everybody, hands up, who cannot hear very well what's being said? Any hands up? Yeah. Let's be honest. If you want to hear, that's what we're here to listen and learn. So
I'll speak up. I'll speak up.
No. It's not you. It's also these are very important. So can we ask our colleagues here in Armenia? Can we pump up the volume, please?
Okay. I thought I was mumbling. Okay, it's not me. Thank you. Maybe I speak too long. I don't mumble. Can I go? Okay. This also leads me to another discussion, which is, we will actually talk about the rules in the next agenda item. I think we are at a conjunction where at some point, and Madam President, you mentioned this idea, we should look a little bit at our assembly, where we are, our posture, what we should do. Some call it a review of our rules. I think the rules should follow first a political vision that the leadership wants to give to this assembly. We have operated now for 30 years on the assumption that we have 3 statutory meetings, we do some elections, we do some visits, and many of these things, by the way, are not in our rules. And election observation missions is not contemplated by our rules, or some committees that we have created are some not contemplated by our rules. So I think we should, I think where we are, it's very good. We have created some practices. I think we should discuss at the political level what we should do in the future. Should we have more statutory meeting, less, more targeted visit, be more operative when a crisis happens, be right there on the spot? I mean, a new political vision that first the political leadership should elaborate, and once that is done, and I would say you will probably establish an ad hoc committee or a group that reflects on this, a group of eminent people, let's say, or experienced people, then we would approve this new constitution of the OSCE. The rules will, of course, be in line with that in order to make us more operational, and then we will enter into this new phase. But meanwhile, we're already operating in a new hybrid situation where we do things that are maybe not contemplated by our rules, but that are anyway the wish of the members. And I would say on a more personal note at the end of my statement, Madam President, of course I welcome any questions. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank Yerevan for having created a more, let's say, constructive climate in the Assembly. I think I can feel very positive vibes in this group. So I think we need to continue like this, and thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montella. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Pons from Spain.
Thank you, Madam President, and if you don't mind, I'm going to try to speak in my language, in Spanish, as we have translation, if you don't mind. So, solo quería hacer una pregunta tanto a la Presidenta como al Secretario General en relación a lo que ha sucedido en las elecciones de Polonia. Yo creo que vale la pena, que merece la pena que se haga una reflexión sobre la idea de que durante la observación electoral, y yo como jefe de misión estaba allí, que haya habido un problema con 30 acreditaciones que se hayan retirado durante 2 días y finalmente se han podido devolver. Me gustaría preguntarle al Secretario General qué se ha hecho después de esa problemática, qué explicaciones ha dado la contraparte polaca, y me gustaría saber qué reflexiones, qué conclusiones se toman cuando se produce un incidente de este tipo, porque estuvimos 48 horas con 30 observadores sin acreditación en un país en el que la observación electoral ya estaba en marcha. Creo que también es importante, porque en un momento de declive de la democracia, ceder a este tipo de situaciones es ser cómplices de esa erosión de la democracia. Por tanto, creo que se resolvió bien, pudimos negociar bien, pudimos recuperar todas las acreditaciones, pero creo que merece una reflexión dentro de la organización cuando se producen este tipo de situaciones, además en un país, en fin, miembro de la Unión Europea, por decirlo de una forma elegante. Muchísimas gracias.
I'm told that there will be an election section at some point, so we can address it at that point. I can just give you what are the principles from our side. I think we consider that all participating states, by making commitments also on election observation missions, they have agreed to invite us, because sometimes we say, are we invited? I think we are always invited. Whether we get a letter or not, we are always invited. This is the first principle. So we are always invited to observe each other's elections. And we are under the assumptions that the country that is being observed does not decide the composition of our delegation. So this is a sovereign, let's say, decision of the president who makes the delegation and those who file registration for the delegation. So the host country should deliver accreditation to everyone. Of course, there are some situations of security. It's a prerogative, more on a national base. But everybody should be invited, and we have made that point also to the Polish authorities. But I think we will go more into the details under the election section later on. But these are the two principles: always invited, and everybody needs to be accredited.
And the next one, Mr. Savinuk from Belarus.
Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель. И я также хотел бы высказать благодарность армянской стороне, благодаря которой, благодаря проведению сессии именно в этой стране, наша делегация имеет возможность участвовать в этом мероприятии. Хотел бы еще раз напомнить и привлечь внимание к неприемлемости ситуации, связанной с невозможностью участия белорусской парламентской делегации в работе ежегодной сессии в Ванкувере. Мы крайне разочарованы неспособностью принимающей страны обеспечить полный и равный доступ всех членов Ассамблеи на сессию. Считаем, что реальная, а не декларативная инклюзивность деятельности и процедур Ассамблеи сейчас особенно важны, когда наша организация находится в глубоком кризисе, а мы становимся свидетелями разрушения миропорядка, затрагивающего все сферы международных отношений. По нашему убеждению, парламентская Ассамблея ОБСЕ должна быть площадкой, где обсуждаются, где дебатируются различные, может быть, даже диаметрально противоположные точки зрения. Кроме этого, я хотел бы обратить внимание и на другой одиозный факт, на недопуск белорусского парламентария, члена национальной делегации парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ, господина Карася, для участия за наблюдением за парламентскими выборами в Польше. Это несмотря на то, что он был официально включен в состав наблюдательной миссии парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ. Подобные действия подрывают доверие к самой идее инклюзивного наблюдения за выборами под эгидой ОБСЕ. Призываем польскую сторону отменить дискриминационные меры в отношении белорусских парламентариев и не препятствовать полноценному функционированию парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ. Такое же предложение имеем в отношении других стран, которые, к сожалению, не в состоянии обеспечить участие всех делегаций на своей территории. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you very much for the question. Again, both on statutory meetings and on election observation missions, the same principle. Everybody is invited and everybody should be accredited. This is the position, of course, of the Assembly. Then the host country has its own prerogatives. But I think we should discuss this because you referred again to the elections in Poland later on in the section on election observation missions, because maybe colleagues from Poland might want to reply. So we will do this later on.
Thank you. And the next one will be Mrs. de Ridder from Germany.
Sehr geehrter Herr Generalsekretär, herzlichen Dank für Ihren Bericht. Sie haben deutlich gemacht, in welcher Systemkrise wir stecken. Und gerade wenn die Generalsekretärin Helga Schmidt nicht wieder bestellt wird, haben wir ein riesiges Problem. Aber das Ganze geht ja um eine Paketlösung. Sie haben deutlich gemacht, dass sowohl ODIHR mit seinem Vorsitzenden bzw. dem Generalsekretär Probleme hat, weiter im Amt zu bleiben, genauso wie die Beauftragten für Minderheitenrechte und Pressefreiheit. Dies zeigt, wie schwierig die Situation ist, in der die OSZE insgesamt steckt. Und wir sollten uns dies sehr bewusst machen und uns auch überlegen, hier in der Parlamentarischen Versammlung, wie wir unsere Dachorganisation stärken können. Es gibt möglicherweise Kompromisslösungen. Nordmazedonien zu verlängern, den Vorsitz zu verlängern, wäre ja eine davon. Aber für kleinere Länder ist es in der Tat schwierig, diese Belastungen auch zu tragen. Und ich würde zumindest hoffen, dass ein Jahr Verlängerung möglich wäre, als Paketlösung dies durchzusetzen. Ich weiß nicht, wie Sie dazu stehen. Vielleicht können Sie noch etwas dazu ausführen. Es gibt ja möglicherweise auch Bedenken von der einen oder anderen Seite gegen einzelne Personen, weil man sich mehr Unterstützung erhofft hat. Auch hier möchte ich noch mal deutlich daran appellieren, diese Bedenken zurückzustellen zugunsten einer Gesamtlösung. Auch hier hätte ich von Ihnen noch gerne eine Kommentierung gehört. Ich will noch einen konkreten Punkt aus Ihrem Bericht auf Seite 3 aufnehmen. Hier haben Sie deutlich gemacht, wo Einsparungen vorgenommen worden sind. Und mich hat erstaunt, aber ich begrüße dies sehr, dass Helsinki plus 50 deutlich reduziert ist. Sie haben geschrieben, dass es sich hier um eine Reduktion von weit mehr als 80% gehört. Das macht im Grunde deutlich, dass eigentlich, ich hoffe, ich interpretiere das richtig, die Arbeit der Gruppe Helsinki plus 50 eingestellt wird. Vielleicht kann man dann tatsächlich umstrukturieren. Ich habe zweimal, glaube ich, daran teilnehmen können. Vielfach waren das ja Online-Meetings. Ich habe den Kostenaufwand nicht immer ganz nachvollziehen können. Aber vielleicht lässt sich dies zugunsten tatsächlich der Tagung und von neuen Ad-Hoc-Komitees umstrukturieren. Diese Idee würde ich auch begrüßen. Auch hier würde ich mir eine Kommentierung von Ihnen wünschen. Den dritten Punkt, die Wahlbeobachtung, das haben Sie schon angesprochen, verlangt natürlich nach Konsequenzen und Bewertungen, aber wir haben ja unter Tagesordnungspunkt 6.1 die Gelegenheit, dies ausführlich zu debattieren. Da werde ich mich dann gern noch mal zu Wort melden. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Madam Derrida. On the OSCE, if you want to hear more, we could spend hours here. I can just give you the gist of the problem. This is the governmental part of the OSCE is an organization that functions by consensus. So the biggest problem is that you need to get all the countries agreeing on something. Now, we are in a very politically divided OSCE, and there is a big problem, well, let's call it what it is. The elephant in the room is that we have sanctions against the Russian Federation. We are very disappointed disappointed maybe is an understatement, with what the Russian Federation is doing in Ukraine and in other parts of the former space. So the problem that we have, that ministers have, is that we have to find consensus, which means we need to somehow also get the Russians on board, but nobody wants to kind of either give them that satisfaction or speak to the Russians about this. So this is where, in a nutshell, the whole thing is blocked. There are different options on the table. There is Austria, which has offered to be the chair, but the EU has always supported Estonia because Estonia had presented a long time the candidatures, but of course Estonia is opposed by Russia. So Estonia cannot go because Russia is opposing Estonia. And the EU cannot leave Estonia behind, and the EU needs to be supportive until the end for Estonia. But Austria is available. The Russian Federation is okay with Austria, but nobody wants to say no to Estonia. Malta is ready to take on this responsibility, and we've heard discussions about this. I don't have updates, and I don't know if the EU would be okay then with Malta, and if then the Russian Federation will be okay with Malta. Kazakhstan was suggested as a possible chair, but apparently the Russian Federation was not happy with Kazakhstan, which is also an oddity. So at the end of the day, you need to get everyone on board. The positions of the Russian Federation is that everything will be decided, the chair and the heads of institutions in Skopje, as long as Minister Lavrov is allowed to fly to Skopje and have meetings there. Now, we have heard that the EU has given a green light to Macedonia to invite Lavrov. I think that the foreign minister of the Russian Federation probably will be in Skopje, and then the situation will be decided there on the spot. But nothing of this is decided. It will be how in the 2 days of the ministerial meeting discussions will take place, and if someone will have a discussion with the Russian Federation and say, can you accept that North Macedonia stays for 1 more year, or do you accept that Malta takes on the leadership? But it will require the Russian being on board with that. If there is not okay from the Russian Federation, then the organization will be in a situation where we do not know who is the chair, and definitely there will be a vacuum of leadership in the 4 main positions of this organization. This is very regrettable, but this is the consensus rule. This is the nature of this organization. Again, as I said, luckily in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly we do not have this problem, because we have a president elected by majority, a secretary general elected by majority, so we do not get into this problem at the political and administrative level. But in the governmental side, this is the reality. We're not suggesting that this should change, because the DNA of the OSCE is that it's an organization that rules by consensus. But when you rule by consensus, these are the challenges you have, and that is the reality. On Helsinki Plus 50, I want to reassure you, we are not decommissioning the project. Actually, we are leading the project all the way to Finland in 2025, when the chairmanship of the organization, chairpersonship of the organization will be held by Finland. The reduction that you see is the compensation, part of the compensation that we were giving to Ambassador Zanier, who is no longer working as a permanent consultant, let's say, for the Assembly. So that's where we save the money. But the activity is ongoing, and we will continue some activities. And sometimes Ambassador Zanier has given his availability to continue pro bono, let's say, to support us on this activity. So that's where the reduction comes from. And on EOM, yes, we will do it in the next agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Montalan. Next one will be Lithuania, and Mr. Giedrus Surplus, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, good morning, and thank you once again for Armenia for a wonderful hosting attempt here. I know we will be discussing election observation missions just in a couple of minutes, but just to react to what you said, Mr. General Secretary, dear Roberto, about the probability of maybe monitoring elections next year in Russia and Belarus, if I got it right. And just reacting to what our colleagues from Belarus said, you know, I feel like telling a well-known joke, if I may. The presidential so-called elections once were held in Russia, and there were some confusions when counting the votes. So they invited the experts from Belarus, and the experts did their job, and they announced that the elections in Russia were won by President Lukashenko. So, you know, when speaking about elections and monitoring, which is the one of the main missions of us, OSCE, I would like to say or suggest that, you know, there are elections that probably don't need to be observed because they are fair and free, and everybody knows that. There are elections that should be observed, and we do that, with all respect to the countries that invite us. But there are elections that cannot be observed because they simply are not elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Of course, I never meant the Russian Federation as a possibility for us to observe. We thought that as the ODIHR is conducting probably a need assessment mission in Minsk to consider whether they might find grounds for observing in Belarus, also because this was a kind of the wish from the Belarusian opposition. We thought that maybe it's worth just having a discussion in the Bureau. I think at the end what you're saying is what will happen. I don't think we will also observe the elections in Belarus. On a personal note, I think that I agree with you that there are some elections where the outcome is not in doubt, where sometimes it's not even worth spending resources. But again, this is a political decision of the Bureau, so I think we should give them the chance to debate this in the Bureau in Skopje. Thank you.
Thank you. And next one goes to Ukraine, Mr. Poturayev.
Dear colleagues, let's remind for a second all the debates this morning. They show that we are facing maybe the deepest and the most dangerous crisis in the history of this organization. Just let's hear ourselves. Mr. Lavrov is going to Skopje to let this organization to work. Mr. Lavrov goes to Skopje to save OSCE. How does it sound like? I don't know what future can be in the organization which will be the hostage of aggressor state, which started full-scale war in the center of Europe, which committed multiple war crimes. Am I going to be hostage of Russians in this organization? No. Are my colleagues going to be? Or a lot of other colleagues? I think no. It will be very sorry if this meeting will be the last one, because we still believe in Ukraine that this organization could be very important and useful for resolving a lot of problems that we, all people on our planet, are facing. But let's accept our challenges and our problems seriously. And let's really think about effective steps against authoritarian regimes, against tyrants, against aggressors and occupants. Let's think about amendments that could change the future of our organization and other international organizations so that they could be really effective teams of politicians and states and not hostages of gangsters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Mikita. Indeed, the organization works by consensus, so the governmental part of the organization is somehow hostage of the consensus rule, so is the UN Security Council. The way out of it is that we need to be creative. So I think at the governmental side, they have to find a way to be creative to come out of the difficulties if they want to keep the organization alive, of course. I mean, there is also other options. When you say we need to find, instead of being hostages, we need to find effective steps against the aggressor or the tyrant, as you say, I think this is the way, and in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly we have found effective steps to sanction those who are in violation of the Helsinki Final Act and the OSCE commitments. And we have done this, and I've said this several times in this forum. We have been providing sanctions against the Russian Federation for the last 14 years. From the last 14 years, from 2010, there is no longer a Russian in the Bureau of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, where politicians have voted against any Russian candidate. So you exercise your right, political right, to sanction the Russians from 2010. There is no longer a vice president. Always there was in this Parliamentary Assembly a tradition that the president of the Duma was also a vice president of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. This doesn't happen anymore from 2010. And from 2014, after the illegal annexation of Crimea, every document that the Russians have presented, like supplementary items, have been voted down by this assembly. So you've exercised your political power to sanction the Russians. You didn't pass their documents. The Russians, on the other side, have never managed to block us. In the OSCE governmental side, they can say the agenda is not accepted, hence the meeting cannot take place, or this venue is not accepted, hence the conference cannot take place. In the Parliamentary Assembly, we have never been blocked. Our budget has always been passed. Our meetings have always taken place, and our resolution every year since 2014, we have called what the Russians did in Crimea a clear, gross, uncorrected violation of the Helsinki Final Act. We named the country. We didn't say a participating state. We said committed by the Russian Federation against Ukraine. And this was a resolution presented by Ben Cardin, a US Congressman Ben Cardin, in 2014. And we have reiterated this resolution every year, including now recently in Vancouver. So I think in an organization that rules by consensus, where it's difficult to come out, we should exploit the comparative advantage which is this Parliamentary Assembly, to exactly do the political work and the sanctions that realistically we can deliver at our level. The sanctions we can deliver at our level are political sanctions, statements, demarches, voting down documents, not voting for Russian members, and criticizing them whenever they are present, as it happened in Vienna very strongly. So I think in this Parliamentary Assembly, I'm very proud of the track record that we've had, notwithstanding the difficulties in a consensual organization we have, to at least be very effective and deliver the sanctions that we could at our level. And I think we have really exhausted the arsenal of possible tools that we have within the Parliamentary Assembly to exercise sanctions from our side.
Thank you. And the next one goes to Austria, Mr. Lopatka.
Now it works. Okay. So thank you very much for giving me the floor, and let me start with the intervention of my friend Mikita Potorayev. And after such a long time of war and atrocities, I fully understand him, and we will never accept to be a hostage of the Russians, of course. But on the other side, I hope, Mikita, we can agree that we want to have a future for OSCE as a special organization, as a platform for dialogue. This dialogue is not possible now, but I have to tell you, some weeks ago, we had the assembly of IPU, and Russian and Ukrainian parliamentarians were for days in one room, and I was there appointed to join there this committee working on the dialogue between Ukraine and Russia. And Mikita, you know it. A delegation was already in the past in Ukraine and in Russia, a delegation of IPU. So we have to be fair with OSCE, I think. On the one hand, there's a big difference between the Council of Europe and OSCE, how I see it. And in the Council of Europe, also with my vote, I supported it to expel Russia. But I will never do it here in OSCE, because I think an OSCE, on the long run, without Russia, such a huge and big country, and we speak of the security of Europe, we need a form to have open channels for a dialogue. And it is very difficult now to find here the right position. But I only want, because the seat of OSCE is in Vienna, to ask all of you, let's do everything that we have the chance to have this dialogue. If we don't have this chance, what is the alternative? The alternative for